welcome, y'all.
Hey.
That's right. This is a Pregame Engineer Tailgate Mayor Racing Podcast, episode number 79 for Tuesday, January 3rd, 2017. I'm Tailgate Mayor Rusty Wallace, joining the Pregame Engineer Tailgate Mayor Podcast studio with Mr. Pregame Engineer Andrew Shorten. What's up, dude?
I promised myself I'd be a little bit more prepared for this sort of intro thing that I usually stumble over. And really all I can say is I'm just excited to do this storytelling episode that we cooked up a few weeks ago. And I've been stewing on it.
Yeah.
So hopefully I can tell the story. I don't know. I don't know if I'm a great storyteller, but we'll find out.
We'll find out. But you're right. We've been cooking this one up for a little while. We've got a very special guest with us today. If you're a fan of the podcast, you know that he had mentioned the last time, you know what? We need to do an episode with y'all where we're just talking stories. And we said, well, yeah, duh. So next thing you know, off season comes around and there's really not a whole lot of news. Though we got a little bit of news today that we'll talk about.
January seems like a good time to do that kind of a show.
Doesn't it? So let's do it. Welcome to the show once again, Mr. Matt Weaver, journalist with Auto Week magazine. What's happening, Mr. Weaver?
Well, you guys talk about, not knowing, how good of a storyteller you guys can be sometimes. Well, understand, you've set the bar awfully low by having me on, 3 weeks apart from my last visit. So there are no standards on the PETM podcast.
Well,
I think that's fair.
Yeah. I don't think we've ever been
totally fair.
Never been accused of standardization across here. I think me and Sherwin have to deal with so many standards at work that maybe we're just ready to go with whatever.
Well, if you ask NASCAR Chasm, clearly that was like the worst thing we could have ever done was to have him. So it makes sense. It aligns well.
Well, before we start kicking off any stories, we got to wet our whistle a little bit. Mr. Weaver, you always bring something fun. What you drinking tonight?
Oh, it's a very, very lame Diet Pepsi.
Diet Pepsi?
Pepsi?
Pepsi, you in the South, ain't you?
I don't know if this is okay or not.
No, I am in the South, but check it out. I am in North Carolina, which is actually the birthplace of Pepsi. So
Correct.
I am geographically secure.
Okay, so you have left Mobile and returned to your humble abode in Hendersonville? What is it?
Huntersville, yes.
Yeah. You know what? I shouldn't have called you out on that where you live because people might chase you down. So, yes, you are in the land of Pepsi. We are in the land of Coke.
Yeah, I think people vandalize the Pepsi stands out here or the displays in the stores and stuff. Sherman, you brought us something very interesting today. What is this?
More interesting than anything I had seen, which is why I had to purchase it. I knew about Innocent Gun because you told me about it.
Oh, yeah, that's good stuff.
And what it is this is a beer company that typically ages all of their beer in some kind of a used liquor cask.
Yeah.
And in this case, because I know you and I both love hoppy beer, we're hop heads, as they say.
Yep.
This is an Innocent Gun that was aged in a used bourbon barrel, but was also hopped in the process.
Very cool.
So it is a full-bodied hoppy ale, matured in hand-selected bourbon casks.
And I thought it was going to be
individually boxed.
I thought it was going to be a 12-ouncer. This is like whatever that weird equivalent of 22 ounces is in the UK. It's like 20.48 ounces,
pint,
whatever.
But there's like three different sizes of imperial pints.
Yeah, right. So that looks great. We'll bust that open here shortly. Looking forward to it. So it is PETM 79. We got to talk about the 79 car real quick. If you talk about the 79 car, there's only one thing that you have to talk about, or only one person who you can talk about, and that's Frank Warren. Frank Warren ran 348 races in the 79 car between 1963 and 1980. The only other, or the next person who ran it, or the next frequent person, I don't know how to say this thing.
That's okay, man.
Like Junior Miller ran 16 races in the 79,
hard.
and he's the next person behind 348 by Frank Warren.
It's hard to find information on the 79.
That's true. So he was kind of one of those middle pack guys. He was always hunting for the funding to be able to race. He led 72 out of the 88,863 laps in his career. First race was in 1963 at the Pickens 500, Greenville Pickens. Last race in 1980 at Dover. One of the last drivers to run a Dodge Magnum.
Wow.
Yeah, Mopar guy in 1980. And today, he's 83 years old. So
Still
cheers to him.
kicking.
He's a veteran, like many of our guys that we've talked about are. No wins in the 79 car for any team.
Hats
but
off.
Hats off and cheers to Mr. Frank Warren. There it is. So get that out of the way so that we can get to story time. But once again, right before story time, so breaking news today, and it has set Twitter alight and everything going on.
Now's probably the better time. This is a good time.
Yeah.
For this.
So it's and it's close to home for us, Sherwin. Our home track, AMS, Atlanta Motor Speedway, has announced that they are going to be repaving right after the race in, is it March this year?
Yes.
Yeah,
March
we'll call it
5th.
March. Oh, sweet. Great. Might have some decent weather then. Weaver, what's the story there?
Yeah, the story here is that the inevitable has come to Atlanta Motor Speedway, and that once the NASCAR weekend in March has concluded, a resurfacing project will begin. It'll wrap up by April. The track hopes that the ensuing 11 months will allow the track to weather in a little bit. They're going to pave it in the same way that they just got done paving Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And, the Kentucky repave wasn't that bad. It's still a repave, and, tracks take a little bit longer to get back to where they were after a repave. But I feel like we're starting to zero in collectively as an industry for how to repave tracks. It was Jeff Gordon who said a couple of years ago, we were talking about repaving, and he brought up that the biggest problem with NASCAR tracks repaving is that they're paving these racetracks like they're roads.
Mm-hmm.
And that you can't treat a racetrack the same way that you would I-77.
100%.
And I feel like in the past couple of years, you start to see a change in the mixture, the combination. Certainly, I feel like Texas probably deserved it more than Atlanta, especially given what's happened with the storms and the weepers, things of that nature.
Yeah, the weepers.
But it was going to happen eventually, and I feel like that's what's happened.
Yeah, I think from the fan perspective here, I mean, it's the same thing. Every year you're crossing your fingers, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it, and they don't say it, and you go, all right, another year. But eventually it has to happen. There wasn't a catastrophic event, though, this time. It wasn't like peeling out the track or the track peeling off or anything.
Well, so that's a great point.
Maybe that's...
And Atlanta never got themselves into that pickle.
Right.
Obviously, they're in the pickle with the weather thing, and we've over-chronicalized that. But we haven't got to a place where we had a delayed race because the surface was a problem. And I was glad to see salty Bob Pockrass on Twitter today because he was pretty salty. Talk about, we certainly don't want the Daytona thing to happen. And I think that's the fear, is that there are some places on Atlanta's track where the speeds are so high, the side force is so high, and the downforce, the wind or whatever created by the cars could potentially pull some of the track up, and that's the last thing they want.
Yeah, sure. Weaver, you think preventative maintenance here is kind of pretty much what happens?
Yeah, I think the key word in NASCAR here in the past couple of years on a variety of issues, whether it's safety, whether it's logistics with the West Coast swing, I think this is NASCAR trying to be more proactive rather than reactive, in that sometimes they've been caught blindsided by certain events. You think about Martinsville a couple of years ago when Jeff Gordon was leading and had his nose punctured when part of the track came up, and what happened at Texas we talked about. And this is just NASCAR and NASCAR and its partner tracks trying to get ahead of the curve a little bit. Now, one thing I will say about this story is that a couple of years ago at the Snowball Derby, I was talking to Kyle Busch about Atlanta and just how much fun it is to watch races there, and how much fun it is for him to participate in races there. And one thing that's stayed with me over the past couple of years, this is the year that he and Eric Jones had that duel, is that Kyle said that if they ever go to repave Atlanta, he's going to lay down on the track in front of the bulldozer as it pulls up the current surface. So, I'm going to have to remind him of that here at the media tour in a couple of weeks and see if he plans to lay down in front of the bulldozer.
Yeah, NASCAR Tiananmen Square stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the same thing as the political stuff, right? I'm moving to wherever if somebody gets elected kind of stuff. I mean, but you respect how many different people have said, oh, my gosh, Atlanta is such a fun surface to race. I hope it stays that way forever. And the reality is that it can't. Even though winter is very mild, we do get a lot of rain. I'm sure that causes a problem. But how have we not figured out, if this is what's fun in racing, is what the Atlanta surface is call it 10 years.
Sure.
It's been, let's call it 14 or 15.
Sure.
We saw some of those early races. Carl was able to go on the outside. Kevin Harvick was able to go on the outside because of how awesome Atlanta's configuration and the surface is, and it stayed that way for a decade and a half. So how have we not figured out how to get the right person from an asphalt engineering perspective, the right person from a stock car engineering perspective, and the right person from a Goodyear engineering perspective in the room to say, I think we can figure out how to repave and still have this surface.
Yeah. I think that's rhetorical because you're the textile engineer here asking a computer scientist and a journalist.
Yeah, perhaps. Well, we did the whole
question.
episode last year where we talked about the polymer-based asphalt at Charlotte, and I think nobody really believed me when I was talking about it because they didn't realize that's what it was, and then Dale Jr. mentioned it on his podcast, and all of a sudden everybody knows, which is fine because he has only 3.9 million more followers than I do. But it feels like we should have figured out by now how to create the surface despite the condition of it.
It's a good point.
I feel like the biggest challenge that Atlanta faces when it comes to doing a resurface is that it's just not close enough to the ocean. And I feel like in the past couple of years, not only watching NASCAR races, but also short track races, I've noticed during this period that there's a constant theme of my favorite racetracks, and they're usually right off the beach. And that you've got Darlington, you've got Pensacola, you've got Homestead, Miami. Usually, you have that salty air, and it's usually very humid, lots of rain, and that tends to weather these tracks in a lot quicker and produce really good racing. And I think Atlanta's been close enough, to the Atlantic that it gets a little bit of it, and that's probably helped the racing there over the past couple of years. But man, you just wish it was a little bit closer to the coast because it would kind of help shorten this process out a little bit.
We certainly get the humidity here.
Well, I talked about this with a friend of the podcast, Brent Jones, about Texas and the fact that they've, like you mentioned earlier, and we saw him mention it on Twitter today and on the Periscope now, is that Texas probably is more needing of a repave and because of the weepers and solving that problem. But Texas has aged tremendously from the last time they paved it. And a lot of that's to do with Dallas at times has some really nasty winters that Atlanta will never have.
Yeah. So what do you think the driver reaction and the general reaction is going to be, Matt, other than is it just slight disappointment and then, we knew this was coming kind of thing, or do you think there's going to be some people laying on the track in front of the bulldozers?
We've started to see a little bit of it on Twitter and on Facebook. The consensus has been kind of a exasperated defeat, in that we all knew it was coming. It was all inevitable.
Yep.
But you never wanted to see it anyway. You keep going from year to year thinking, all right, one more year of racing on this version of Atlanta's surface. You get past it, and then you think, give us another year. And I will say one thing that is kind of comforting is I remember a couple of years ago, the first race that we had in late February, early March at Atlanta, when the crowd was just awful because it was really cold. There was some real concern leaving the track that night that we might be looking at the beginning of the end of racing at Atlanta, just because the market has kind of rejected racing in the past couple of years. NASCAR and SMI have struggled to kind of figure out what the right date is. September was really a struggle because you had college football kicking off.
Yep.
Usually the Braves are contending for a playoff spot, and that nobody cared about racing.
Don't push that Braves dagger into me, though.
But Atlanta has struggled to find its footing, and there was some concern that it might have to go away. But to me, the one solace that I take out of this is that Atlanta is very much going to be a part of NASCAR's future, because you don't make an investment like this unless there's an assurance beyond the 5-year sanctioning agreement that NASCAR is here for the long term. And that's good for me because, Atlanta has traditionally, alongside Homestead, Miami, been my favorite mile and a half. Some of my favorite races have taken place there, and hopefully they found the right formula to make this track age in a little bit, and we can talk about great races for years to come.
Yeah, well, I think I said on Twitter earlier today, I think that Atlanta, what's different about Atlanta from Charlotte and Texas is that it has such a wide radius in the corner. The corners are so long. It feels like even if they put down the stickiest asphalt possible, you would still have at least two grooves of racing.
Sure. I think that's a great point that Matt just brought up, just that this shows that Atlanta's not going nowhere.
Right. We've only got 3 years left on the scheduled contract, but
yeah,
what is probably going to end up being a multi-million-dollar investment means that there's life beyond it.
Sure. Yeah, great point. Let's move on. We said it's a story time episode. We'll start with this. Something easy for you, Weaver. How's this new job going for you over there at Auto Week magazine?
Yeah, it's a little bit early to know for sure. I mean, obviously, I've enjoyed my time there over the past year and a half, working as a freelancer, working as a weekend copy editor, and in many ways, what I'm doing now is not that much different than what I've been doing for much of 2016. I'm not going to have a better idea of what my life and career is going to look like until once the season can kind of start, because right now, basically all you're doing is rewriting press releases, and, you're really not getting into anything that's too heavy. There's nothing to really chew on. There's no racing going on. Certainly the Roar before the 24 is this coming weekend, and that leads into the Rolex itself. The Chili Bowl will give us something to kind of chew on. But until you're in that weekly grind where, for me, it's really going to be complicated because I'm going to be trying to focus on NASCAR, IndyCar, sports car, also my short track stuff, trying to balance all of that at once is going to be an interesting challenge, because there have been times in my life where I would try to do NASCAR, IndyCar, and short track, and then the NASCAR side would get so heavy and I'm just focusing on stock car stuff. Now I'm having to pay attention to everything, and certainly I'm being compensated for it better than I have been before, and so certainly I can be willing to take those responsibilities on, but it's going to be interesting to see how that's going to work out, because in years past I could kind of focus on one discipline and try to flesh it out better, but now I'm going to be all over the place. I'm going to be going to IMSA races, I'm going to be going to an F1 race, NASCAR, IndyCar, and just trying to balance all those responsibilities are going to be a challenge, but I'm looking forward to it.
That's awesome.
That is very cool. I'm anxious to hear, what you report on based on those experiences, because those are things that we would certainly consider doing. I mean, we already had chatted up going to Barber in April.
Yep.
I think now we've decided we're probably going to go to Bristol, so that makes that a conflict in terms of too many weekends doing fun things. But at some point it makes a lot of sense to do a one day in, one day out there for sure.
Yeah. So I think that's a great segue into the first question we had here, into story time, which is, what's up with you in the short track racing scene? So obviously we know you love short track racing. Tell us what's going on with that, and your path forward on that.
Yeah, the past 6 months or so presented some new challenges that I really wasn't totally prepared for. And most of this has gone away, but every now and then someone brings up something about what happened at Nashville, or what happened at Pensacola with the Snowball Derby credentialing process, or what had happened at the Slinger National, stuff like this. And I kind of wanted to use the podcast as just an opportunity to kind of put a bow on the topic. I do not want to go into 2017 still talking about it. I hope that everyone kind of learns something from it, and then hopefully these sort of conversations don't become the narrative at the expense of the racing product and the teams and the drivers. But I kind of wanted to respond to some things that were thrown my way over the past month or so, especially leading up to the Snowball Derby. because I didn't talk to you guys last until after Homestead. So obviously the whole Derby stuff happened, and we hadn't talked since then. But there was this one thing kind of brought up about how, well, maybe you're the problem in short track racing if this just keeps happening to you. And a part of me kind of takes offense to that. This is not me trying to be combative. This is not me trying to be a cancer, as one person pointed out to me. Someone had told me, there's some in short track racing who see you as kind of a cancer. And that kind of bothered me a little bit because to me, if you look at the overall body of work and what I had done for the past 4 years, I've done a lot for short track racing, and not that I've made a huge difference, but I do feel like my strength is that I reach an audience that the hardcore streamline short track media don't reach, and that I spend time in national touring, that I spend time in IndyCar, and I'm able to bring this kind of racing, short track racing, to an audience that normally isn't exposed to it. But the politics at that level they're just different. And I feel like there's a lack of understanding of how journalism should work and how the national narrative should work at that level, because to me, I do the same things in short track racing that I do for NASCAR the past couple of years in that job, for what I've done in IndyCar, and what I plan to do moving forward for everything that I do. And there's been kind of a rejection of it, because there's this mentality in short track racing that unless you're promoting it, then you're trying to hurt it and you don't belong. And that if you come in and you're trying to tell, facts, or if you try to provide constructive criticism or conversation, there's no place in that, and that I'm trying to now bring it down. And I just wanted to kind of respond to that a little bit, to the perspective that I love short track racing. I don't make a dime off of it. I do it because I love it. And, there were certain points where when the Pensacola credential policy was released, or when Nashville denied my credentials, people would say, well, if they don't want your coverage, then don't give it to them. But to me, I felt obligated to not only fight for the industry that I love, and for me to be able to continue bringing these stories to people that ordinarily wouldn't have it. I'm also trying to fight for what I believe journalism is in an industry that doesn't totally recognize it, because there's this kind of, you have to be PR to work in short track racing, to make media work in short track racing. And I reject that, and I don't believe that. And again, I don't want this to kind of carry over into 2017, but I stood up for certain things that I believed in on multiple occasions in 2016, and some people said that I was trying to be combative, or that I'm just trying to stir the pot, and that couldn't be further from the truth. I would love to show up at a racetrack like I do more often than not and just tell stories. When someone tries to tell me that I can't tell a story because it's truth, or I can't share opinion columns because if it's not positive, it doesn't belong, well, I've got to show you how the industry works, because it works everywhere else in motorsports outside of short track racing. And again, I don't want this to be the story again from this point forward, but enough people keep bringing it up, and it's certainly a question here that I wanted to kind of just let people know, look, I love this, and I'm going to continue operating short track scene on the side here at Auto Week. Sweet. And they're letting me do that, and I look forward to being able to tell those stories in my current role.
Well, the concept that you would show up at a racetrack is, particularly when you were doing it on your own dime, to basically, in the mind of the promoter, poop on what the activity was there at that particular racetrack, is about as asinine as anything I've ever heard.
Right? I mean, you're there to, like you said, tell the story.
If you were there to be a nuisance, you'd have a big old sign that says short track racing 8 mother sign or something.
Right.
And here's the deal. I think people tend to focus on only the negative stories or things that they don't like, and then they ignore everything else. And if people could kind of step back and look at the overall body of work, not only on the short track side, but also in racing as a whole, most of the things that I do is informative. It's very positive. It's shining a spotlight on people that ordinarily wouldn't have it. But anytime that you have to kind of, put a jab in there or tell a hard truth, people are just going to focus on that, and they're going to ignore all the good things you've done. And I feel like that's probably the case here.
Yeah.
Well, think about like we already mentioned it once. We like Bob Pockrass when he's being salty, and he brought up the stuff from I guess it was 2011 when the track came up or whatever it was, and it's like reminding everybody that NASCAR had a major event where the surface quality of the racetrack was not good enough, and it pissed a lot of people off. Like we have to have that. Like,
yeah.
In
You
racing, you have to have that.
Yeah, you got to have that. And I can't imagine anybody who used the word cancer in this context.
They certainly don't know anybody who's ever died from it. I guarantee you that.
Well, there's that. But also, I mean, I can't imagine that anybody like that has started in the sport in the last decade. I mean, we're talking about the old guard. We talk about the changing the guard on the podcast every probably dozen episodes here. And this is a changing of the guard. We talk about it in terms of NASCAR, but here's one in journalism right here, in NASCAR journalism. And if you're not keeping up with the times, if you're not keeping up with what is good policy for Twitter, Facebook, Periscope, etc., and not coming up with good policies for that, and inclusive policies to a point, then you're left out in the dark. We've talked about it here before, us sponsoring Kenny Smith in the 24K car there at Lee County Speedway. Now, I don't think they've ever been kicked out for Periscope in those races, and I think I would hope that the promoters there and the owners there of that track are thrilled that somebody is posting live video of that. Now, of course, there's no TV contract that they're battling with, but just the fact that again, that they get more viewership and more PR about that track.
Well, I don't think we've seen a lot of it lately, but I think what we saw when Periscope first bloomed, we saw people doing it at UFC fights.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of fallout from that because overall their exposure increased.
Yeah. Yeah, people are going to buy it are going to buy it.
Pay-per-view buys started going up. Now, granted, I haven't seen anybody Periscope UFC fight in a while, but still, like, it's like, well, I mean, NASCAR has long existed in the arena of any exposure is good exposure.
Sure.
So why wouldn't short track racing be the same way?
Yeah, good question. So, Weaver, you've wrapped it up in a bow. We're tossing it aside. 2017.
We're throwing it in the fire.
We're throwing it in the fire.
Right over here in the fire. That thing is burnt.
Have you seen? So this is funny. Wrapping it up in a bow and throwing it in a fire. Have you seen the sort of meme or whatever it is about? This was over the holiday season where these parents would wrap just empty boxes and put their kid's name on it.
Throw in the fire.
If the kid acted up, they'd throw one of the presents into the fire.
My God, that is mental terrorism.
That is.
But it's not
I just
unfunny.
saw that meme a couple of days ago myself, and no lie, I sat down and pulled out my notepad and kind of made a note, something to do here. 20, 30 years from now, should Weaver disastrously ever have a kid, this is on my agenda. I'm going to have the empty box that I throw into the fireplace.
I won't hate you for it, I promise you.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I think parents will like talk about with their friends. Like our friends who have kids would be like, "Dude, we totally threw like 3 boxes. They were just devastated." And 20 years later, their kids are going to write a book on how awful their parents are and how they
they're going to be talking to their therapist about
mind effed them on throwing their fake Christmas presents into the fire. I love it. So there it is. Weaver, all right. Next question for you here. Given your experience with all the short track racing scene stuff and all the other experiences that you had, maybe you can give some advice. We know we talked to a few aspiring writers out there on Twitter, and we're friends of them, and they're part of the PETM posse here. So thank you for all those guys who interact with us and everything. And several of them who've been listening to us on and off. What's some advice you might give them?
Yeah, this is a question that I get every now and then. And the first couple of times that I had been asked for some sort of professional advice, I thought to myself, especially over the past 6 months, that I am the last person that needs to be giving anyone professional advice for how to make it as a media person in racing. But then I kind of take a step outside of myself and then look at the overall picture, and I've had a good little run. I feel like I've been able to do some really cool things. I've been able to tell some really good stories. I've built largely good relationships with people across racing, and I feel like there was a certain model that I followed to get me there. And I have always really enjoyed a sense of being able to give back. Back when I was at school at South Alabama, and I was a part of the student newspaper, when I was a sports editor, I would bring all of my writers in a couple of times a year, and I'd buy them all food, and I would just talk about things that they could do better or any advice that I had for them. Then as an editor who had no idea what he was doing, talking to my writers who had, even more of no idea of what to do. And so I've always really enjoyed giving back. And now I feel like maybe I've got more of an idea. I've got more of an idea what to do wrong than maybe what to do right. But no, at the end of the day, this is what I would say to anyone who wants to do this. And I work with a lot of younger riders at short track scene. During my time at Popular Speed, I was working with a lot of kids who are in their late teens, early 20s, trying to cut their teeth in the industry. I do it now at Motorsports Tribune, which is kind of a side project of mine. And to me, I would tell them all this is not going to be easy. And if it were easy, there'd be a lot of people with this job who would get paid to go to the racetrack. And to me, I think it requires a certain sense of sacrifice. And that's kind of a hard thing sometimes for, late teens, early 20s to hear, that they're not going to have the social life that they necessarily want. They're not going to be able to have the possessions they want, or the kind of apartment or house that they want. It's going to be a lot of driving across the country and sometimes sleeping in your truck. And we'll share those stories a little bit down the road on the podcast. But there's a lot of sacrifice involved. And make no mistake, this makes good memories. And I can't wait to share some of these stories, because some of these stories make me smile about how stupid I was on certain occasions, or just the kind of situations I put myself in. But it's not easy, and it's not going to be, cushy. It's not going to be something that's handed to you. You have to have a lot of will, and you have to be willing to market yourself. And look, sometimes I've been accused of being overly showy or maybe a bit of a braggart, but I had to create a personality. I feel like I had to create a sort of, brand or some sort of following, and I had to be a character, a personality. And I'm not saying that this isn't sincere, but sometimes you have to do things that are kind of counterintuitive to a traditional journalist mentality, because the industry has evolved. We're not writing, we're not putting ink to papers anymore. This is the internet age. This is the social media age, where everything has to be presented in a way that is a combination of education and entertainment. And to me, that is the best advice I could give is, one, you can't give up. You've got to be willing to do stupid things that just do not make a lot of sense from a financial security level. And you've got to be willing to do things that create a sort of identity for yourself and people who want to follow you, and carve out a niche. For me, it was always short track racing. I wanted to be in NASCAR, but I needed to cover something that no one else was, because I needed something that made me stand apart from everyone else who is trying to write about NASCAR. And look, if you're writing the same press release fodder that every other 19-year-old, 20-year-old is, what are you doing that's going to separate yourself? You've got to find some kind of niche. You've got to create some sort of identity. And those are the kind of, bullet point things that I would tell young writers for how to break into the industry. And that's my way. Everyone's got their own way. I've done a hell of a lot of things right. I've done a hell of a lot of things wrong. But those are the things that immediately come to my mind for, how to get ahead in this always changing industry.
Yeah. Well, I think I can attest to that, as not even trying to be a professional journalist, and Rusty kind of getting dragged along the way like a can on a string, is me trying to figure out how to get people to pay attention to what we were doing here, and using Twitter as the vehicle to do that. I didn't always make good choices, and I didn't make friends with everybody that I interacted with.
Yeah.
But we're here where we are now, which feels like a fun place. And it sounds like you're in a fun place.
Well, and on top of that, I mean, I feel like you should get some either gratification or some self-worth out of the fact that you know, if you're in media and you're starting to talk to these drivers and stuff, like that you have, like Weaver, you talked about with talking to Kyle Busch about laying in the middle of the road at Atlanta and stuff. That's really cool interactions to have, and I think that, I don't know, that kind of hopefully motivates folks going forward and stuff to have that kind of story and be able to either write that, talk about it on a podcast, whatever. So yeah, that's. I think that's really cool. You know, just little things like maybe even something that maybe you've talked to Kyle Busch so many times it doesn't matter, but even hearing it from this perspective, it's really neat to see. So I think we'll move on to some more juicy stuff here. How about that, Sherwin?
Well, I see the questions in front of me. I know what's fixing to happen.
Right. So,
but I don't know what the response is going to be. So
you've had some life events, we'll call them, over at the Daytona International Raceway. There, you got a Fast Driver Award, and you had a little run in with the local. With the local popo. I wonder if you might be able to indulge us in that interaction.
Yeah, so like I said, I've made some interesting decisions, and I've justified each of them with the notion that one day would lead me to where I am now, which is having a full-time salaried position in racing. But, you know, to get there sometimes has been a challenge. And I guess the first story that I would share is I sat on the pole. I got the P1 award leaving Daytona
right.
a couple of years ago. This is the one where Juan Montoya hit the jet dryer.
Yeah,
I can't even remember who won that race. Was that one won by Kenseth or Dale?
That was Kenseth.
Okay, I was going to say I don't remember, but I do remember one thing from that race, and that was
that was Kenseth number 2, I believe.
Yeah, I thought that was Kenseth too, but it's funny, you know, leaving that race, the one thing that was on my mind was, one, that Juan hit the jet dryer, and two, we nearly ended up with, I believe, Dave Blaney winning the Daytona 500 if the track couldn't be repaired from the jet fuel eating up the racing surface.
Yes.
So, anyway, I'm still in school. I'm still attending South Alabama, and I had been in Daytona for 2 weeks, covering the entirety of Speed Weeks, and I had missed a lot of school. And most of my teachers were understanding, but only to a point. And keep in mind, this race was rained out to Monday night.
That's right.
So I'd already missed classes on Monday, and now I'm trying to get back for, you know, classes on Tuesday morning. They start at 9:45 Central. And so we didn't leave the media center for that race till 3:30 in the morning.
Oh, goodness.
Because there was the delay and there was the kind of rainy start. And plus, you know, Daytona 500 post race takes a long time just because the winner has to do TV, local media. He has to take all the pictures, and then he does the post race media center Q&A.
Not only was it delayed because of the jet dryer issue, it was ultimately rained out, was it not? At like 12:30 in the morning.
I think that race went to completion.
Is that the one that? So it finished. Okay, so sorry to distract you, but yeah. So the race definitely didn't end. Like the checkered flag didn't fall until almost 1 a.m. Eastern.
Yeah.
Right. So I've got to be in class back in Mobile, which is about 7.5 hours away. I'm leaving the track at 3:30, so 2:30 Central, and the math just isn't adding up. I've been awake since 3 o'clock in the afternoon
It's Friday
to cover the 500 itself, and I'm going 95 to 100 down Interstate 95. I might have mistakenly saw I-95 and thought 95 mile per hour speeding limit. Keep in mind that all the teams, they have to hurriedly go back to Charlotte and change out their Daytona cars for their Phoenix cars. Phoenix is race number 2 at this point of the year.
Yep.
And I'm wedged between a team hauler. I forget which one was behind me, but the ESPN TV hauler was in front of me. And we're all going 95 to 100 down I-95 north.
A hauler.
And naturally,
I mean, eastbound and down.
I'll tell you what.
Now, granted, the hauler in front of me might have been going, in the range of 90 because I was catching up to him. But I'm wedged between two haulers, and there's a cop sitting in the middle of the interstate, and he's not going to pull over the two haulers. Mm-hmm. He's going to pull over the truck in the middle. And I change lanes as soon as I see him because I know what's coming. And, as soon as I change lanes, the light comes on. I'm already on the side of the interstate, stopped. And, I get my license ready and my insurance, and I have it ready before he even, gets to the truck. And at the time, I don't even have a hard card. I still have a paper credential. So they make you carry your license inside your paper credentials. I couldn't even fidget my ID out of my paper credential because I have the credential pocket to hold it.
Oh yeah.
And so I roll the window down. I hand him the stuff, and I explain the situation. And he even says, you know why I pulled you over? I'm like, yeah, you don't have to tell me. I know. I know what I did, and I've got no excuses. There's nothing I can say. You got me.
Yeah.
He's like, well, why were you going, 96 miles per hour on a 70? And I'm like, okay, well, here's the story. We were in Daytona for the Daytona 500. I told a bit of a lie. I told him I had to be in Phoenix.
You got a lot of the cop.
He doesn't know that, but I'm like, I've got to be in Phoenix. The entire industry's flying out of there. You saw the haulers that I was wedged between. We're all trying to get the hell out of Dodge. And I'm like, I've got no excuse for you. All I can say is that I did it, and it is what it is.
Yeah. What are you gonna do now?
So, so he takes my license. He goes back to the car, and he takes a good 15 minutes. And if if he's taking that long, you're about to get got. And he comes back. He's got the paper in his hand, and he's like, "Well, Mr. Weaver, let me tell you what I'm going to do for you." And I pause for a second. I'm like, "What you're going to do for me? I'm worried to death. What you're going to do to me?"
Yeah, right.
It's a different preposition,
so he said,
right? Or whatever.
you pulled right on over. You didn't make me chase you. You were up front with me. I appreciate the honesty. I'm going to get you for lack of insurance. And I'm like, but I gave you my insurance. He's like, Mr. Weaver. And he starts winking at me. I'm going to get you for lack of insurance. And if you show them that you had insurance and you didn't have it on you, it's going to be a $10 fine. Slow her down and get home safe.
Oh, man. What a guy.
Me go. 97 on a 70-mile-per-hour interstate.
Jeez, that brings up a story.
Sherman's got a bunch.
I got another story.
He's gonna have to load them up.
I have three. I have to tell them all fast. I don't know.
That's awesome of that dude. Then, and where was it exactly?
This was north of Daytona, obviously. So it was probably.
Had you hit 10 yet?
South of Jacksonville. So it's before you get to 10.
Okay. So I mean He knows this Daytona 500. People stepping on the gas. I go a little faster when I'm going away from a racetrack.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's man.
Well,
that's cool,
and I'll say this based on personal experience: honesty works a lot of the time.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's not. I mean, sometimes you get a ticket because you broke the law, but there's nothing wrong with being honest with a traffic cop.
Now you had.
Well, look too. What story could you possibly make up for going 97 and a 70? There's no, my foot slipped or,
well, I can tell you about
the
that.
music was loud.
My wife's pregnant. Wait,
what?
Where?
I got to take a dump.
Oh, jeez. So that's not your only run-in with Johnny Law at the track, is it? At Daytona?
No. Last July was a particularly good one.
Johnny Law.
Yeah, this is the one where Austin Dillon ended up in the catch fence and tore the fence down a little bit. That race was also held up by rain a little bit, and that race started late as it was. But Dustin Long and Bob Pockris at 3:30 in the morning go out to the catch fence together to get some pictures. They found out that no one's really stopping anyone from walking up there and looking at it. So they come back and they had tweeted out some pictures and attached some to the stories that they had wrote. Actually, no, it was Bob and Jeff Gluck. So then me and Dustin go out there. We're the second wave, and we're out there doing the same thing, taking pictures. And this time, the head of security comes up there and asks me, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm media. I'm with him pointing at Dustin. We're here just taking pictures of the damage for our publication. And he was having none of it. And he's like, well, who said you could be here? And I'm like, well, I've got a hard card, and no one said that I couldn't be here. I'm just, I'm not getting too close. I'm just taking a picture. And he was just really, really aggressive about it. I don't want to go, too inflammatory because it got ugly. It turned into a war of words because, he was a bit short with me. It was 4:00 in the morning. I was a bit short with him. We had been up, both of us had been up since well before, 10:00 in the morning, and tempers were already naturally flaring because I just wanted to go in there, take my picture, and head back to the media center. He didn't want to be pulled away from his post, wherever in the hell that was, and neither one of us were cooperating with the other. I may or may not have called the guy a dick. And from there, hard cards were taken, and, sheriff deputies were called, and I was escorted off the premises, and I had to kind of apologize for being so terse, and I got an apology back from the track, and we all just agreed that it was a weird situation when a car ends up in the catch fence at 4:00 in the morning, and security guards are unhappy, and media is unhappy, and in hindsight, it's kind of a funny story, but yeah, I was given the full escort treatment, and that I was put in the car. They drove me to the media center, and I was told to pack up my bags, and I had to wait around the next morning whenever the track office was open to retrieve my hard card because at the time, of course, I'm driving to all these tracks. I had to turn around and go from, Mobile to Daytona, back to Mobile, get a quick shower, a bite to eat, and then drive all the way to Kentucky because that Wednesday they're doing the new rule package testing. Yeah. And so having to leave the track at 10:00 in the morning on no sleep as opposed to, 4:00 in the morning and getting home at like 7 or 8 was just a complicated ordeal. But again, a year and a half later, I kind of laugh. It's a fun story, and I've got no animosity towards Daytona. They do a great job. I understand the situation there. It's kind of a scary situation because the catch fence was kind of mangled, and it's a live, not a crime scene, but it's a scene of some renown. And, he was being protective of that area, and I was being protective of a journalist's duty to get the picture. And so it's just one of those cute stories you tell, 2 years, eventually 10, 15 years later about the time that I was put into a cop car at Daytona.
Well, every time, there's a lot of those stories that you look back on them and it's like, well, it's funny to talk about. Yeah, it sucked at the time, but it's definitely a fun story to tell.
Sure. All right, Weaver. Back on PETM 73, so we're talking about 6 episodes, 6 weeks ago, I believe, because we haven't really
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we haven't really missed any here.
We found out you had some truck issues in Daytona.
Well, there was
we capitalized on an opportunity.
Yeah, yep. But I think what spurred this whole episode happening is you went, I've taken some interesting showers. We're like, of the, what variety? We're not talking about, the golden kind or something.
Oh, no, goodness.
No. Well, I just had to bring that up.
Whoa.
I'm throwing that out there. No, and you said, what?
Back in.
Let's, we need to have an episode on that, on, just storytelling about that stuff. So this is... we're intrigued about your shower stories. Sounds like you had a sprinkler story that's worth sharing on the podcast here.
So again, and I totally have no shame in some of the things that I put myself through just to cover races. Again, I'm driving back and forth to as many races that I can get to on a college kid's budget. I'm laughing at Ashley's comment there on
cents.
on the Periscope.
On the Periscope, yeah.
Distracted me. But I have no shame in some of the things that I've done because they make for great stories, and they allow me to get on a podcast like this and kind of recant them a little bit. And so one of my favorite stories is, again, this is Daytona. When you're forced to go to a place for 2 weeks at a time and kind of just make it work, you have to do some interesting things. So before I had the luxury of being able to stay, with friends at condos or at hotels for 2 weeks, what I would do is I would go to Daytona and I would cover the practice or the qualifying sessions or the races at the big track. I'd kind of clean up in the bathroom a little bit before heading down to New Smyrna Speedway about a 15, 20-minute drive south, cover the late model and modified races down at the short track. And, once that is over, I would go down to the 24-hour Walmart, which if anyone's been to New Smyrna or they've been to Daytona, they know this Walmart. It's right down the road from New Smyrna Speedway. And in Florida, all the bathrooms are handicap accessible, which means they have a room which is for handicap patrons with the lowered sink. And what I would do is I would go in there and I would clean up that way at the end of every night before, falling asleep in the parking lot at New Smyrna Speedway. I'd drive back to the Speedway and, get some shut-eye in my truck down at the Speedway.
Yes.
But at one point, a cop found me there and was wondering what I was doing, and he said that I couldn't sleep in the parking lot. There were times I didn't want to go to Daytona with myself either, trust me. Again, reading the comments here, responding to a comment. I was roughing it. One time a cop found me down at the New Smyrna parking lot and said, this is private property, it's closed, you can't be here. And I asked him, I'm like, well, this is my situation. I'm a college kid. I'm trying to cover the races at the big track and the little track. I've got no money. I've got just enough money to get me to Daytona, get some free catering, and be able to drive back. I've got no money to find anywhere to sleep. He's like, well, if you drive down the road closer towards the beach, there's a Harley Davidson. It's lit up. It's right across the street from a precinct. I'm sure you can sleep there, and I'll radio it in, and nobody will bother you.
That's
so
cool.
I drive over that direction towards the Home Depot,
cool.
and it's just or the Harley Davidson rather. It's way too lit up for me. I can't sleep. I tried sleeping in the Walmart parking lot, way too lit up. I like the New Smyrna Speedway parking lot because they turned the track lights off and it got dark. You could sleep. You could also get mugged, but what did I care?
What are you gonna get?
Yeah, exactly. It's like you've got this truck which is falling apart, and this was 4 years ago, and so it's really falling apart now. So if you know what, put me out of my misery. I'm sleeping in my truck, 600 miles away from home. End it. Luckily, that never happened. I had a random girl walk in on me at the Walmart parking lot once. She thought that I was someone else. That's another story. She realized I wasn't who she thought I was, and she was like, "I'm so sorry." But going back to the whole shower story, I find a Home Depot instead, and they turn the lights off at 11:30. So I stay there for a couple of days, and I start to realize the sprinkler system turns on at midnight. 30 minutes after the lights turn off. So I'm thinking to myself, I've had these little Walmart, lowered sink tub showers, baths, whatever you want to call them, pat downs. But I'm like, I haven't had pressurized water in like a week and a half at this point. I got here.
Upgrade. Home Depot, baby.
Day, the Wednesday before the Unlimited, or the shootout at the time. And this is now the Friday after the Truck Series race. I need something that resembles a shower. Here's a sprinkler. I've got a bar of soap here in my truck. So I clean up in the Home Depot. I'm wearing shorts and a short sleeve T-shirt, and that's how I shower in the Home Depot parking lot.
Total upgrade from the Walmart for sure. I mean, Walmart to Home Depot, shoot.
Oh, goodness.
And again, I totally recognize that these are awful stories, and I'm sure there are some veteran journalists who think that I'm it's a black mark on the industry. But again, when you're 22, 23 years old, you've got big dreams, and you just want to chase them. You want to be at the racetrack. You're willing to do whatever you can to get there, and that's where I was. I was willing to do whatever it took to get to the racetrack, talk to drivers, talk to crew chiefs, owners, tell stories, and get my name out there. And I was willing to do things like that. I'm not telling everyone that's what they have to do, but I thought that was what I had to do. And again, I was clean. I had to find creative ways to do it, by God. But, I'm here and 28 years old. I've got a career, but those were the days.
Oh, man. I love
it. These stories are so much better, though, than like whatever the Silver Spoon story would be.
Well, for sure. Yeah, right. I mean, the Home Depot upgrade on the pressurized sprinkler head shower, absolutely.
I know we're an hour in, but I've got to tell you guys about Kansas now.
You have to.
No,
Yep.
it's on the list.
Yep. Oh, it's written in stone here. So talk to us about Kansas.
I don't know how much time we got here, but there's
we got all the time in the world.
We got plenty. Off season doesn't matter.
Off season,
Rusty's got a great story, and I've got a great story. So this might go another 30 minutes. Who knows?
Who cares?
So this year, the spring race at Kansas Speedway. The Cubs are in town in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
Being the huge Chicago Cubs fan, I'm under what I believe to be the false delusion that this is the year. This has to be the year. The Cubs were in the NLCS last year. They're an even better team this year. I need to see the Cubs team the year they win the World Series.
What an illusion!
Hey, that happened. Total illusion. But I went and covered the race at Kansas. On the way back from Kansas, you go through St. Louis. So I watch a Cubs-Cardinals game, 2 of them, in fact. And at this point, I'm a little short on money. Not shower in the Home Depot sprinkler system short on money. But to me, I'm already heading back.
Maybe like the Neiman Marcus parking lot, right?
The little side hose.
well, the thing was, is I'd actually stayed in a hotel for all of the race weekend.
Okay.
And so I'd already used up money for 3 days' worth of a hotel. And so to me, I'm already heading back home. But I wanted to watch the Cubs and Cardinals play this night-day 2-game set. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to watch the night game and then find some place to sleep and then go to the day game the very next day. And so I go to the night game. The Cubs win. I'm happy. I'm excited. Good vibes. Looking for a place to sleep. I'm trying to find a rest area. I've got a rest area pulled up on my GPS. I come up closer to it, and it's closed. They've got the gates pulled up over it. You can't get in. And so I'm like, okay, well, this is a challenge. Do I try to sleep just on the side of the road? Too noisy. That doesn't work. I try to pull up to a pilot station a little bit further down the road.
Yep.
Too lit up, too busy. Trucks are coming in and out. Diesels, way too loud. I'm like, screw it. This isn't working either. I got to find some place dark and quiet. So I drive down this country road behind the pilot station for a good 15, 20 minutes, and it's just a bunch of farms and, cornfields. It's right out of a horror movie. I actually had that thought. It's right out of a horror movie. And then the pavement on this road ends. I'm like, okay, well, this is interesting. I'm going to keep just driving down this dirt road, and hopefully it'll take me to the other end, which will lead to another paved road where I can find some place where I can freaking go to bed. Because it's now 2 o'clock in the morning, and I've been driving around for an hour and a half trying to find just some place to lay my weary head.
Yeah.
So I come to a dead end. And, the dead end is about half of a football field away, and I see movement. I'm like, oh.
Slender Man.
Oh. And then I see more movement. I see eyes, multiple eyes. It is like these, late teens, early 20s, kids who are clearly up to no good. They are dressed like they are up to no good. There's like 8 or 9 of them. And I'm staring these kids down. They're shouting at me. They're like, yeah, come on. You want some of this? I'm like, no. I do not want any of this.
This is not how this works.
Keep in mind, I've reached the dead end. So all there is a pole with reflective tape wrapped around it to signify that you've reached the end of this road.
No.
I've got about 15 feet of corn, 15 feet high to the left of me, to the right of me. I don't know if there's more of these guys, in the cornfields. This is right out of a horror movie. Yeah. I start to look backwards thinking, am I being surrounded? What's going on? Do they have guns? I don't know if they really wanted me to come over and smoke a pipe and have hot dogs with them, or if they were going to kill me.
Yeah.
So, I hightail it. I reverse it, and I just throw my right foot down, mash the gas. I don't even remember if it was a straight road or if it had turns. I didn't care. I was just going to back the F out. And luckily, I didn't run over anybody. I found the closest, farm driveway that I could, and I was able to get out of there. No harm, no foul. But I felt like I was about to get got. And what I did was I took my happy butt back to that bright, loud pilot station, and I slept my ass off.
Right there in the pilot station. After dealing with Children of the Corn and Deliverance.
Yeah, at the pilot, you could probably pull into like a semi spot, and they would probably leave you alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the lot lizards wouldn't know. That might be a different story.
And yeah, there's actually tweets about that. If you guys can pull it up on my personal account, the J. Matt Weaver, I actually tweeted to detail. I even pulled up the Google map of where the road ends. I'm like, right here. This is where I nearly died.
We're gonna look that one up. That's funny. Excellent stories from Weaver on the storytelling episode. Sherwin, let's dig into. We figured we'd throw a couple of our own in here just for fun, since it's a storytelling episode. You've got a little episode of yourself.
So I think I've alluded to in the past that I really didn't receive my master's in redneck until my later teenage and early 20 years from friends that I didn't meet until I was probably a junior in high school, and am still very good friends with today.
Mm-hmm.
So I will be a little vague about some things in order to protect them, because they have their own business interests and they don't need that out there in the world. But the story I'm going to tell is called Dynamite Fishing at the Farm.
Dynamite Fishing at the Farm.
And I'm pretty sure I was either 19 or 20, and the only reason why I don't know the difference is I think it happened in New Year's of my sophomore year in college, but it could have been my junior year. So I was either 19 or 20 years old. Excuse me. And so this is a 3-part story, and I'll try not to drag it on, but casually, while we were doing some work on one of the barns at what we'll call the farm, the box that we had to move in order to secure another board, we had the nail guns going. We were basically building a canopy for a barn using the main trusses on the sides were semi-trailer with no wheels, right? It's a great way to build a barn, as it turns out. But so we're building this, we're putting up all the trusses and whatnot, and we have to move this box. And the father of the friends of mine just happens to casually mention that box is full of dynamite from when he had purchased said dynamite from the DNR when they had a beaver problem.
Okay.
That is a thing.
Blow up the dam, I guess?
If you can prove you have a beaver problem, you can purchase dynamite.
All right.
As a civilian.
Okay.
Welcome to Georgia, folks. So he had a case of dynamite. It only took 2 sticks to blow the beaver dam up. They had all the other ones. So I mean, you can see all the 18 to 19 to /20-year-olds. When he said that was dynamite, we all kind of had the look, that stare of we're gonna do some dumb stuff. And we did. So, and to educate you guys on what dynamite is today. Dynamite today comes in a plastic tube. The powder is separate from the liquid.
Okay.
So the nitroglycerin is separated.
Yeah.
And there is an electronic impact detonator that basically just need a car battery.
Okay.
You put one side down, make it hot,
and
kaboom. And and all you need is telephone cable, which we had miles of.
Sure.
At the farm.
At the farm.
Air quote, the farm. So we're like, all right, we got to try this out. I don't know what's going to happen. We got to do this. We're going to put this in the water, and we're blowing stuff up, and we don't know what's going to happen. So we gather up 1 stick of dynamite. We gather up 1 lawnmower battery and 900,000 feet of telephone cord. And we go down to the creek, and what's funny is on the other side of their property is not public land, but it's not protected private land.
Okay.
The guys that fish over there, old local guys, they're not really supposed to be there, but
right.
Nobody chases them
who's
away.
going to do it? Yeah.
So we roll up to this nice big spot. We think, all right, this is the spot we're going to try this out. Dude is just casting in there trying to catch stripers.
So there's somebody there. This is daylight?
Oh, this is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Attempt number 1 occurs middle of the afternoon. All right. Now, meanwhile, of course, we've already been drinking.
Yeah, clearly.
So forget about the age, but this is just reality. And so, like, we got that, like, evil giggle. Everybody's got that.
Right.
What's going to happen next?
Yeah.
And, like, we look at the guy fishing, and we're like, you probably should leave. And he's like, gives you that, like, the guy that's 60 years old and, like, well-weathered.
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
seen it all.
But he's not technically allowed to be there either.
He's like, he doesn't say a word, but he gives you that, I don't think I'm super excited about whatever y'all are fixing to do.
Right.
It's like, what are these three little white boys going to do? This old black guy, he's fishing. He's just catching fish for dinner, and we're fixing to touch off some dynamite. And so we did.
You're right.
And I mean, nobody knew. We were all scared because we're like, I don't know what is the result of dynamite?
Yeah, yeah.
So we threw it in the water that was like 3 feet deep. We all ran back. We were like 100 yards away, and we touched this thing off, and a wall of water like 30 feet high in a circle about 12 feet in diameter just goes, good. And we're like, that was cool. All right, we'll file this away. We learned something today. We didn't get in trouble. Nobody died. We're going to do this again.
Nobody died, even if injury happened.
Yeah.
Right.
So, that was probably like, I don't know, maybe 2 months leading into New Year's or whatever. Like,
yeah.
It was just 2 or 3 of us, and we had it figured out. All right, so New Year's swings around, and all of the crazies come in for New Year's at the farm at that time.
Yep.
Like, the people that are willing to make some really bad decisions.
Right.
And so we're like, all right, we have to take the dynamite down to the deep part of the creek.
Sure.
Where the fish are at.
Yeah, yeah.
And see if that whole dynamite fishing thing is real.
Right.
Like Crocodile Dundee 2, he's out there in the New York City Bay or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And gets rolled up on by a helicopter. So, like, it's pretty obviously we didn't hide very well what we were doing. So one of the guys in the deer camp was like, what are y'all up to?
Right.
And we're like, well, we're thinking about doing X, Y, Z. And he goes, you better go now because you need to be back by dinner. And you need to all come back.
Right.
Like, everybody needs to come back.
With limbs and...
And so off we go, and we try it again, this time in like 20 feet of water. It makes a very different... Like, it's not nearly as loud and not nearly as big of a waterfall, but it's like fish started floating. And we were really interested in getting them at that point, but it was like...
Sure.
This is a real thing.
This actually works. It's not like cow tipping.
And that was like the day after Christmas when we did that. So like 5 days later, when all the real crazy guys roll in, we're like, we're going to do this upright. We went down and wired up 8 sticks of dynamite.
Oh, good God.
And stuck them all in the water. And there was 4 dumbasses not named Sherwin that were willing to get in the John boat that we used to place them.
Oh, Jesus.
And stay in it while we touched it off.
Oh, geez.
So we touched it off. Only 3 went. It was
great.
Very interesting. It's like, I don't even know how to describe it because there's no other thing. Like, it is like, so you've been at a good fireworks show.
Sure.
But the firework blows up 200 feet above your head.
Sure.
Imagine that firework blows up like 10 feet away from you, but it's underwater.
Yeah, boom, boom.
Like, and like 3 of them go boom, 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 like in a matter of like maybe a second and a half.
Yeah.
And I mean, everybody starts laughing, but like, it's like, hey man, y'all get out of the water. and like to beat the band, the last guy out of the John boat flips it and gets completely soaked. And this is New Year's Eve, so it's like 11 degrees. And like, guns rolled into the water. We spent the next 2 hours cleaning guns that were muddy but yeah, so dynamite fishing.
That's fun. That's a fun story. Good stuff. Weaver, you've ever been dynamite fishing?
I have never in my life. Now, the closest thing that I have been, and I barely remember the logistics of how this worked, but when I was little, I would go fishing with my dad and grandpa, and they had some sort of device rigged up to where there was a battery, there is a plastic deodorant container, and they would fry fish that way. I have no clue how that device even works, but that's the closest thing to my mind that I can equate to that.
That was ingenuity is what that was, for sure.
Oh, blowing up deodorant cans is how I learned how dynamite fishing was
right. So I figured I'd share one as well. I don't think mine's that good, dude. You rocked it on that one. That was great. I'll call this one Cashing In. That'll be the name of this story if I have to give a name. It's Cashing In. And here's what happened. So we were when me and Sharon met, we were in a fraternity at Georgia Tech. One of the things you do with as fraternity brothers, once you're a brother, you're the new pledges come in, and you want to. They all have to get your signature on there. We call it a paddle, but it's whatever they decide to make of it or whatnot. And so you do different things. Some guys are just Richards, and they decide to
definitely some Richards.
Yeah. They're like, do my laundry, and I'll sign your paddle. So, whatever. That's stupid. Let's go have some fun. Let's go do something a little different. So we decided that we were going to go to Stone Mountain. Stone Mountain is a local attraction here in Atlanta. That it's a 800-foot tall mountain, kind of sticking up over the top of just pretty much plains in that area.
Largest exposed piece of granite on Earth.
Yep. And carving on the front of it. They do a laser show every night and fireworks and all that mess. And so it's kind of a thing. If you're in Atlanta, you've gone to Stone Mountain. So we decide we're going to go to Stone Mountain. Now, Stone Mountain closes at like 11 p.m. or so and doesn't open again until 7 or 8 a.m. But we decided we want to go watch the sunrise over Stone Mountain. And we had done it once before, just a couple of us. And I had an employee pass. I'm not going to say where I got it from.
It doesn't matter.
Might have been my wife. But I had an employee pass on my car, like the sticker kind. So that meant you can get in whenever. It doesn't matter. If it's 3 a.m., you get to go in. So what we did was we decided we were going to take 4 pledges and 2 brothers. So there was 6 of us in a tiny little car that I was driving, and we're going to stuff all the pledges and brothers in there, and there was just going to be 2 of us. Like, it was going to be me and another guy in the front seat. So I was in the driver's seat, he was in the passenger seat, and everybody else was kind of covered up in blankets. We could pull the rear seats down, so we had access to the trunk. So there was like 3 guys in the trunk. There was another guy kind of laying in the floorboard of the back seat with a blanket over him, and me and that guy. And so we did all this we didn't do that going to Stone Mountain. Getting to Stone Mountain, we just all sat in the car. And then we had the blankets with us and all that. We pulled into a parking lot before we got to Stone Mountain. We set everything up. We closed all the doors, put the blankets on people and all that, and then rolled in. All right. And I rolled in. I told the lady, and Sherwin, you've been witness to this. I'm just kind of like if you just act like you need to be there, they just kind of believe you.
Rusty's really good at that.
So I just roll up and I'm like, hey, I'm here for work. I work over at the blah 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 blah. I don't even remember what it was called at the time, but I was like, I work over there. I'm going in. I start like leaning off the brake pedal, so I start moving. And she's like, "Oh yeah, go ahead." But I'm already by her.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, it doesn't matter. Yeah,
it
doesn't matter. Yeah, I don't give a crap about you. So at this point, we're not going to go over to the hotel area. We're going to go over to the mountain where you start climbing up, so we can watch sunrise on top of it. We're going to climb the mountain and go up there on top of it. So, some funny Periscope comments. So what we decided to do was, if I turn off my lights and don't use the brakes, instead use a parking brake, because if you use a parking brake, the handbrake, it
doesn't light up the lights.
Right, the brake lights don't come on because it's the drums instead of the calipers or whatever. So I'm driving around like that, and sure enough, pass a cop and
lights off.
Immediately, lights are on. He comes, pulls me over, and he's like, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, crap, we got caught. What are we gonna do? I'm talking to my buddy who's sitting next to me. We got 4 people in the back that are hidden, and in the trunk and stuff.
17 people in this car.
Yeah. So so I'm like, what are we gonna do here? He's like, I don't know. And cop walks up, sir, what are you doing here? And I'm going, well, I know somebody who works here. We're just going to come out. I was just like, it's back to one of those honesty things. Like, man, we're just going to come climb the mountain to watch the sunrise, to be honest, And he's like, all right. He goes, you have any bombs or anything or any blah, blah, blah. Just asking that cop question to, like, throw you off. And if you hesitate, then you know that there's something wrong.
Right.
I hesitated.
Oh, no.
So I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure.
We brought our bazooka.
Right. And so my buddy's sitting next to me. He goes, sir, there's 6 people in this car. And the cop looks in and he goes, there's 6 people in this car? We're talking about a tiny-ass little car. Said, yes, sir, there's 6 people in this car. He says, okay. He says, let me get your license registration and insurance, right? So ends up, my insurance had expired a month prior, or like not even a month, a week prior or something, right? So he thinks he's carting me and 5 other people, if he believes what I just told him about how many people are in there. He thinks he's fixing to cart us off to jail or whatever. And so he comes back to me and he says, son, your insurance is expired. You're going to have to come up with insurance. Now, we're coming to see the sun rise, remember. So what time is it? 4?
Not
maybe?
Super early.
Right? Because we're going to...
Or depending on your perspective.
We're going to watch this thing rise at 5:30 in the morning from the top of the mountain. We have to climb the mountain, which is a mile plus 800. Yeah, it's 800-foot climb. I say climb, you just hike up to the top of it. But we decide...
it's not the North Face, but
so he says, you're going to have to find me. You're going to have to get you your insurance before I let you go. Otherwise, you're going to jail, and this car's being impounded, and all your friends are going to jail. And I went, crap, what am I going to do? Now, this is before everybody had cell phones and stuff, right? There wasn't no... There wasn't no, like, smartphones. There wasn't nothing like that. I had
this was straight up 2001.
Right. So, if you had a cell phone, you'd, like, ooh, look at you, fancy pants with the cell phone,
Flipper and all that.
Right. So he goes, if you can find insurance, I'll let you go. And I'm like, this is my get-out-of-jail-free card. I got to do this. And so, fella in the backseat, I asked the cop, I said, do you have a phone on bar? He goes, no, I ain't got no phone. I said, all right, and I call into the blanket fort,
into the trunk.
Yeah, and I go, hey fellas, anybody got a cell phone? Now, no person answered me. There was just a hand that reached up through the blankets with a cell phone and just held it up. Didn't say a word. Just here comes a hand with a cell phone, held it up. And this is where cashing in comes in. When you go to college, and your parents go, listen, son, I don't care if you get into some situation, if you're in a bad way, if you're at a party, if you're at whatever, and you need assistance, if you need help, just call us, and we won't ask any questions. We'll come help you, right? So I'm 2 years after that talk, right?
Right.
And I go, okay, I'm cashing in.
Throwing in the chips.
I had to call my house twice. My mom finally picks up. I'm like, let me speak to Dad. He'll
process it.
He'll get this. Yeah. And I told him where I was. I'm at Stone Mountain. I need the insurance card. He had the new one. He said, all right, I'll be there in about 20 minutes, how long it took. He drove over there, got the card and all that. Now, to this day, and he showed it to the cop. He talked to the cop for a bit. My dad's a salesperson for, as his occupation. He's selling the cop on "Don't arrest my son, please," and ends up we drive back, 3 with my dad, 3 in my car, all the way back to my house. And my dad's like, "Yeah, just throw everybody back in the trunk. You can drive home or drive back to the fraternity house, whatever." And I call it cashing in because to this day he hasn't spoken a word to me about this story. Has never said a thing about this. But the only thing he ever said to me was the end of this story right here was, son, and he said this right as, he said this like the day after. He said, son, I don't know what you were up to. I don't know what you were doing. But in the end, if you're trying not to get pulled over, try not to have 4 feet of blanket sticking out of the backseat of your car. I didn't know that was the case. We were just driving around, 4 feet of blanket sticking out of the car, no lights on, brakes using the handle. Talk
Straight
about a
up
target.
Kidnap people. Like, flapping in the wind.
Man.
Got a tail rudder.
Oh, man. Mr. Weaver, I hope you've enjoyed our stories as well.
Well, I have, but now I'm looking at pictures of seals because apparently I look like a seal turned into a human. So I'm trying to figure out how that works.
Oh, what are we going to do? Yeah, it's off-season, y'all. We're not talking NASCAR as much. So
I told my mother not to listen to this episode.
That's a good idea. I should have told my dad not to. You know how we end this? We got Strange with Stang, y'all.
We sure as hell do.
Yep. And Miss Ashley J. Stang, she sent us in a question. I'm going to field this one. The question is, all right, football party etiquette, right? There's always that one guy. She put guy in quotation marks. It shouldn't ever interact with humans. However, you're still friends for whatever reason. Let's just call him Richard. We know where you're going with that. He comes to your football gathering, gets drunk, yells a lot, double dips in the sauces, then insults your wife, which, by the way, I like how double dips in the sauces comes like before the – it's like he double dips in the sauces and insults your wife. Like, it's not even like those are equivalent things, you know?
A lot of times they are.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So the question is, how do you subdue this ass clown, as she called it? So, A, do you ask him nicely to leave and risk a scene and maybe get punched in the face? B, do you videotape him, relax, and laugh at him later? Or C, taser him, because that sounds effing awesome.
Yeah, I just did use a word there.
Well, so, Ashley, I'll answer this for you. What I do with that guy is I start a NASCAR podcast with that guy.
Oh.
I don't double dip.
Fair point. Weaver,
I am not a double dipper.
Weaver, what do you do?
Oh, I take him out of the pasture. There's only one possible solution here. You put an end to that right then and there.
Attaboy, you can take the boy
but
out
if he
of
can ride the bull, doesn't he get to stay?
Look, let me tell you something, too. A place back in Alabama, it's not even on the map. The road just ends. And so this guy goes missing at my football party. You never hear from him again, and everyone keeps it a secret, and we go on and just go on with our life.
Well, I mean,
That's
that
the way to
works.
do it. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's the casino style.
Yeah, right? That's guy code, right?
Yeah, that's execution there.
Right.
Execution of the project, not execution of the human.
Right. So
no, I laughed my butt off when Ashley sent this in because I was like, oh, boy. I know I've been called this guy before.
I laughed my butt off.
I've done enough of these things to make sure that I blame myself for some brief period of definitely being that guy.
Right.
Except for the double dipping.
Right.
Don't
double dip. You turn the chip around to the backside and use that side, right?
That you've already touched, that you touched your butt with earlier, but no, that's okay. It's fine now.
Oh, we're going deep. Mr. Weaver, let's leave the floor to you. Thank you for so much for being on. Okay, go ahead.
One more tribute. I don't think this will take long.
Yeah, get into it.
PETM 79. We always want to remember the 1979 Daytona 500 because I don't know that we would have
great
NASCAR as we see it today without that really random snowstorm that had the entire eastern seaboard locked inside and ready to watch the Cale Yarbrough Donnie Allison fight.
Yes, sir. Mr. Weaver, let's give you the floor. Tell everybody where you can find anything you want to promote and any last words.
Well, real quick on 79, don't forget that everyone likes to talk about the 1979 Daytona 500 for the moment that it produced. And it was absolutely a turning point in the history of NASCAR. But the entire 1979 season as a whole might be my favorite, up there with the 92 season, up there with the 2007 season, 2011. It was one of the great all-time NASCAR seasons. Let's not forget that was the debut of Dale Earnhardt, the Richard Petty, Darrell Waltrip championship battle that went all the way to the last race in Ontario. It was just a great all-around season with good racing, a great schedule. Some of my favorite tracks historically were on that campaign. There is a great book. I want to make sure I get the title right, but I believe it's He Punched Me, so I punched him back. I forget the exact.
I know which book you're talking about. That one's on my list.
About the 1979 season.
Yeah. That's the book written from Donnie's perspective, right? He punched me, so I punched him back.
It's just about the entire season. give me a chance to do some research here, because I want to promote this book, because I actually read it a couple of years ago, and it just kind of reaffirmed why I got into motorsports journalism, because I wanted to cover a season that was as good as the 1979 season.
That's a good.
Hell yeah.
That's a very fair.
It's a noble endeavor for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So and that's going to be on my list now. To listen to that, or to read that one. People,
yeah, I'm trying to find this book, but I can't. But anyway,
it's
I'll
all
get
good.
to the plugs.
No, it's
here.
fine.
Here, I found it. It is He Crashed Me, So I Crashed Him Back: The True Story of the 1979 NASCAR Winston Cup Season.
Love it.
By Mark
that's
Betchel.
awesome.
It's on the list.
I want to read that.
Yep. Weaver, where can people find your work? Any last words?
I think after all these stories, people are going to want to stay away from me. You know, the guy might stink a little bit. He's a terrible writer, all the things. But for some reason, if you guys still want to interact with me, I make it very easy. There are two Twitter accounts, 2 Facebook accounts. There are all the social medias. There's the Instagram, but find me on Twitter at Matt Weaver AW. If you want a more personal touch, a place where I tweet about things that are not racing related, that's what J. Matt Weaver is for. On Facebook, Matt Weaver Motorsports.
Well, that's awesome, Matt. We certainly really appreciate you joining us for this episode that we had no idea what it was going to end up being.
Yep.
We'll figure it out later.
Yeah. An hour and 26 minutes
as our Periscope followers have said, it won't be long before we ask you to come back again.
That's right. Appreciate you being on. Folks.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Folks.
Raise some glasses up.
Yep. We'll talk to y'all next time. Next week, same PTM
That's right.
time.
And
same
we've got a
PTM
different kind of
place.
guest next week. Going to be fun.
Ooh, look out.
A country music singer.
Okay, look out. That's going to be some fun stuff. Y'all know where to follow us at PETM Podcast. And as always, I'm Tailgate Mayor at Tailgate Mayor.
And I'm pregame engineer Sherwin at pregame ENG.
Talk to y'all next time.
Thumbs up.
Excellent.
Thanks, Matt. That was awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate the time. I hate that the first half had to be kind of me. I never responded to Drunken Brian France, damn it.
Oh, you know what? That would have been funny, because